Everyone, and welcome to the College Chats podcast. On this episode, we welcome back our guests to talk about flyovers, sonic booms, and fixing the college football schedule. But first, with the chaps, I'm George. I am joined by my, pardon the pun, wingman, the maverick of our trio, Oliver. How are you, my friend?
Oh, the introductions are back, George. I very much enjoyed that. Very much enjoyed that. I'm all right, man. I'm trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to stay up until 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, November. Now that Sacramento State are in the MAC, I'm presuming we're going to get 10 p.m. Eastern kickoff. So I'm intrigued to hear from our guests as to how the college football playoffs going to committee are going to stay up until gone midnight Eastern time watching Mac this year to make sure there's not a Mac team worthy of being in the college football playoff. But yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening in college football in this wildest of off seasons I think that we've had for
Well,
I can't even think when.
if any committee moan about staying up to midnight, then they just think about Oliver staying up till 6 o'clock in the morning. Our guest returned for a second time, and we're hugely grateful for him, which is no surprise, as his stories of flying a B-1 bomber last time were the highlight of our season. So it's awesome to welcome back Executive Director of the College Football Playoff Committee, Rich Clark. Rich, welcome. How are you?
Oh, I am great, George. It's good to see you and Ollie again, and thank you for having me back.
Oh, I mean, I think we said at the time, but some of your stories were the best stories we've ever had on this podcast. So
Uh-oh,
we couldn't wait to get you back to hear some more.
that's a low bar. That's a low bar. Oof.
You'd be
But I
you'd
got stories, good or not. I got stories.
well,
So,
you'd be surprised on this podcast, I tell you. Right. So last time I talked about the flyover, right? And when we first met, you were at SEC Media Days. You just started the role as executive director. Your introduction was about your flying career, your military career, right? So we kind of wanted to get a little bit more out of you. The last time you were on, you kindly talked about the flyover at the Army Navy game.
oh
And
yeah.
and and it got me thinking a little bit, right? Because I've watched a couple of um these kind of pre-game shows that happen not necessarily on the day of the game, but maybe they're previewing the day before. Good example, actually. Marty McGee were on Saturday from Daytona, and the Thunderbirds were practicing their heads, right? And it was hilarious viewing. And you talked about you got limited practice, so this is a three-part question. The first bit is how much practice do you actually get for a flyover? Uh, this might sound like a really silly question. What is it you're trying to achieve? And an even sillier question is, if you see some of these pre-game shows kind of happening in do you purposely try and disrupt things by flying over the top of them, which is a bit of devilment on my part. But yeah, I'd just like to hear what you think.
Well, so the first one about how much practice you get, usually you get one practice, right? And that's just so you can see the stadium or the target, if you will, of where you're doing your flyby because you want it to be lined up and you want it to be right. You only get one shot at it. So you get one practice and then you come back. You usually do that the day before. But it's helpful because you might think you know what that stadium looks like on the ground, but it looks completely different from the air. And so having one time to fly over it, see what it looks like is really helpful. And the last thing you want to do is have a bad flyover. When you got thousands and thousands of people watching you and they're sitting in the stadium and you're flying over there, not over the stadium. That's embarrassing. So you want to have that one practice. Now, I think your other question is, are we trying to disrupt like a broadcast? No, we're trying to disrupt everything because we want everybody looking at us. We want everybody to look up and see our plane flying over, making a lot of noise, and doing it in a way that is inspiring to folks, right? And I will say it is disruptive when we fly. We try to make a lot of noise. We try to fly as low as we possibly can within the legal limits. And that's what it's about. But I will tell you, to me, as a flyer and a person who's done many flybys, it never gets old to me. I love seeing a flyby over a stadium before the game starts, regardless of what the game is, what the sport is. It just, I think it elevates things and it gets people excited and fired up right before the game starts, just to set another mood. It does for me, and I've seen thousands, and it never gets old. And when I got to do them, it never got old. I love doing it. So yes, you have to practice. Yes, we're trying to disrupt. Okay, you got us. But I still think it's a great thing.
It is a great thing. It's a great tradition in a sport of many great traditions. And I think for people across the pond here in the UK and the greater European mainland, one of the other great traditions of college football and all American sports really is the national anthem. And so often those two great traditions intersect each other. And this is a purely college football podcast. We don't talk about the NFL, but I think one of the great examples we've just seen from Super Bowl 60 was you saw that incredible footage as Charlie Pugh finished the national anthem, and the end of the flyover was just timed with just such great, like just incredible, impeccable timing. As the pilot of the plane conducting that down to the very second timing, how do you get that? I mean, you're a military man, so I guess the answer is with great military precision. But how do you get that timing right to just hit the stadium as the national anthem is coming to a close?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ali. So first I'll say that flyby over the Super Bowl, you know what that lead plane was, right? That was a B-1 bomber. So
Yes,
I'm just saying, just for the record. But the timing of that anthem, that is a stress-filled moment. But here's how it happens. There's actually a person on the ground as well, that's talking to you on a radio from the ground. And what you know is the anthem takes about a minute and 50 seconds, I would say, plus or minus 10 seconds. And so you have to get in the ballpark of that when you start what we would call the run-in, right? So you're talking to that person. You have a general time of when the anthem is going to start. Sometimes it might be a few seconds before, after that time, but you start your run-in at that time. And then that person on the ground will give you what we call a time hack and say, okay, the singer is 2 seconds late, 3 seconds early. And you can make small adjustments, but I'll be very honest. Once you start that run in, you only have a few seconds that you can make up or lose. You can't change by 20 seconds, in a minute and 50-second run in. So you have to sort of nail the time from when they're supposed to start and the time that you start your run in, and then you just have a few seconds there where you can make it up. So the key is to start flying in right from the point that you say you're going to start flying in, a minute and 50 seconds from that point to right over the stadium, and that point from when the song is over. And so you're just trying to make it up there with a few seconds of, we'll call it makeup capability in the middle. So it is stressful because the last thing you want to do is hit that really early and drown out the sound, or hit it really late where the singer's trying to hold that last note until you fly over. They turn blue because they've been singing because you're so late. It's just, but when you nail it, it's the best. And really, you only have to, if you're a second or two off, you're close enough that you're hitting it at the end because you're kind of overhead the stadium, but you want to get that as close as possible because it is the national anthem, right? And you're a national asset, and it's a national game. You just want it to all come together and be right. So there's a lot of pressure on that, but that's what makes it fun, right?
Well, you said that. I was totally taken aback by at the national championship game because the flyover was the Coast Guard helicopter, wasn't it? Right, or helicopter.
Right, yeah.
Is that do you think that's harder to do, Rich, or is it harder if you're flying at such high speeds in the B-1 bomber? to adjust? I mean, is this an unfair question? Is it harder to do that in a helicopter?
It's got to be easier because a helicopter, you can stop. If you're, a helicopter, if you're flying and you're early, you can stop and wait and then keep going. In an airplane, there's no stopping. You got to keep on going. So I think the helicopters are probably having a little bit better, but it was actually pretty cool because it was dark at the
Hmm.
national championship. You could fly an airplane over and you'd never see it, you'd hear it. But the helicopters, they were nice and slow and steady, and you could see the lights. You can make out the silhouette of the body of the frame, and it just, went right over right at the time. So it was very appropriate for a nighttime game.
Hmm.
Airplanes don't do so well at night, but the helicopters were great.
Yeah. And as you said the last time, we don't want them waking up babies at that time of the evening. We are going to talk about college football, but before we do, I think just there's a law. I think in your country there's a respect for the military, which we all kind of admire because I'm not quite sure we have quite the same respect. Certainly, if we've got respect, I think it's done in a much quieter way. What's your proudest moment, your favorite moment of your time in the military? Because I didn't do the same introductions the last time, but you've had a long and illustrious career in the military.
Yeah, I was very honored to be a part of our Air Force, 38 years. Lots of great moments. Did you ask me this question last time?
I don't
I don't
think
want to.
so. I'd hate to
Oh,
think I'm going back over old ground, Rich, but I mean, you might have called me out on that one. I don't remember asking.
well, okay, so I'll tell you my proudest moment because I don't want to repeat a story for you, but um, it was in combat, and it was one of my crews. I was the squadron commander of a B-1 squadron, and we had 24 crews, air crew. And I remember on the night before everything started in Iraq, I had to line up all my crews, and one of my crews was very young. And the B-1 has two pilots and two navigators, two WIZOs, as we call them. And they're the ones that do the work in the back. The pilots, as the navigators would say, we drive the bus, we get them to the target so they could execute the mission. And I had a really young crew, and some of my senior folks in my squadron were saying they're too young, they're not ready. And I was like, I don't have a choice. They have to be ready. They are trained, and we have to execute this mission. And so they went out on their first night, or it was actually the second night of the war, but it was their first night of flying in combat for all four of them. None of them had flown in combat before. And in the B-1, we carried 24 2,000-pound bombs, GPS guided. And one of our key missions was really to protect our allied lives on the ground. So if there was an allied force on the ground that needed air power, that was the preeminent mission at all cost mission. And so they took off and they dropped their first 12 bombs on designated targets, and they hit those targets and they did it expertly. Then they just orbited until someone called and said, we need weapons. We called it dynamic targeting. So if there was somebody out there, a ground force that needed air support or something like that, then they were there. And the crew was orbiting, they were waiting, they had 12 bombs, and they were getting close to their bingo fuel, which is the fuel. When you hit bingo fuel, that means it's time to go home because you only have enough gas to get back home. So it's time to leave. Well, they were getting close to that, and they get a call from AWACS that says AWACS is the plane with the big dome on the top of it, and it's a command and control. So they're able to talk long distances and do the communications required in the battle space. And AWACS calls them and says, we have a unit of Army members, soldiers on the ground, and they're getting attacked by Iraqi armored vehicles. So they gave the crew the coordinates and they gave them the radio frequency, but the crew is near bingo fuel. They were almost at that fuel where they had to go back, but they said, you know what though? We still have gas. We'll go and do this. So they took the coordinates, they fly to where this ground troop was, got them on the radio, and they could hear the the bombs going off in the background. They could hear this soldier on the ground just dire for some help. And the soldier said, there's a ridge line with Iraqi vehicles that are shelling us, mortar fire, artillery fire on top of about 150 soldiers. So the soldier on the ground started lasing the targets, and he would pass the coordinates up to the B1. The B1 crew would enter those targets into the weapon, and then the bomb would hit. And they just started doing that on top of these Iraqi vehicles. Well, the Iraqis then started firing back. Obviously, they started shooting missiles. So now the crew is threat reacting. They're putting bombs on target. They're trying to support. And then they hit their bingo fuel where they needed to go home. And they told the guy on the ground, the soldier, we have to leave, but we'll get someone back here for you. And he said, you can't leave. We need more bombs. If you send someone back by the time they get here, we're dead. He said, okay, we'll stay. And so they kept on putting these bombs on target, threat reacting, bombs on target, until the soldier said, okay, artillery stopped, mortar fire stopped. The crew left and they started flying home, and they realized they didn't have enough gas to get home. And so they start looking for alternate airfields outside of Iraq. They can't find anything. They get on the radio with AWACS, and they're asking AWACS, is there a tanker that can come refuel us? And the AWACS says, well, we can't bring a tanker into Iraq because they don't have any they don't have any defensive systems. A tanker heard them on the radio and volunteered to fly into Iraq, refuel them, give them gas so that they could get home. And they refueled them. The crew came home. I didn't know what happened to them. I was waiting for them on the ground. When they came down the ladder, I saw them. The pilot had salt stains on his back. You know how after you work out sometimes I said, what happened? Where were you guys? And he said, well, sir, we overflew our bingo today. And I said, well, there's certainly more to the story than that. And they told me what I just told you. And all I could do is put my arms around and say, you guys are heroes. And all four of them were awarded Distinguished Flying Crosses. But the best thing they got was an email from that soldier on the ground that said, you saved 150 lives today. And so it wasn't, that was my proudest moment, to see people, my fellow airmen doing something like that. Just made me proud to be a part of a team like that, and I think about that story a lot. And I try to tell it at every opportunity because it just reminds me of what true character and courage is really about. And that's what they showed that day.
Yeah. It almost feels trivial to switch gears to talk about college football after that story. Rich, thanks, George, for scheduling the episode for me to follow up on that story with switch to college football. Thanks very much.
So I can help. So it takes courage and character to play college football and to win and to excel. And it's the same kind of character, I think, that wins on the battlefield, that wins on the football field. And I believe that. Maybe the stakes aren't as high, maybe the risks aren't as high, but it's the same mindset. It's the same attitude of selfless service, going out there for your team and performing for the team. How's that? That's a way to transition.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I was going to go with, well, from one team to another that you're leading now in the College Football Playoff Committee. So let's talk about college football. Let's talk about the College Football Playoff in 2025, 2026, because I think for a lot of people, myself included, George included, the 2025 college football season and the playoff that was the culmination of that was one of the best that we've seen in not just recent college football history, but in college football history. Like, just an incredible season packed with storylines and a great climax to it. When you look back at 2025, what was your thoughts on the playoff, and how good was having two teams that kind of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere because that's disrespectful, but kind of came out of nowhere in Indiana and Miami to make the College Football Playoff National Championship game? How good was that for the sport?
I think you hit it on the head, Ollie. It's about the stories of those teams, because it was a spectacular season. The regular season was just awesome. Some great games, teams that really had that spirit of competition, and we just saw it on the field, and it was amazing. And then in the playoff, I mean, you look at what Miami did. They came back from a pretty tough start of the regular season to really climb back up that ladder and get into the playoff. Indiana, unheard of, like you mentioned, and I'll say it, but they're not unheard of anymore. 16-0 is pretty spectacular. But even teams like Ole Miss, what they did and how they went out and they beat Georgia. Some of their games were the best of the whole season. But I think you had a lot of different storylines throughout that people could really get their arms around and put their hearts into, and couple that with some great competition. It just made for really a special season for us. And it's hard to imagine it getting better, but there's always surprises. Like there's always things that happen or teams that, like you said, come out of nowhere. I don't think any of them would be offended by that because they did, and they did it in great fashion. So I do think it was a spectacular year. I was honored to be a part of it. But my team and we just set the venue up. It's really the teams that make or break it. I mean, it could be a blowout, and that's good for one team, but maybe not so good for the other. But when you have the kind of competition that we saw and people putting it, and we were kind of tongue in cheek talking about the character and the courage and the spirit of competition that happened on that field. That's what people love to see. People that are willing to go out there and risk it and put it on the line to win, and that's what they did. And I think we all love that, right? We all love that spirit of competition, and that's what they gave us. So I think it was a special season, and I hope we see a lot more of that. But you just have to wait. That's what makes it exciting, right? You don't know sometimes what to expect, and you just got to wait and see.
One of the things that has made the college football playoffs so exciting is the fact that we've had this almost incredible storyline where the conference champions, who effectively get a bye to get through to the next round, have, until Indiana managed to lose those games after the bye week. In fact, Indiana is the only one of the 8 teams in the last 2 seasons to have got through. What are your thoughts on that? Because the bye week, you would think, should be wholly beneficial for the team that gets to sit out for the week. They get a chance to rest up, they get a chance to recuperate, they get a chance to plan. But yeah, it seems to work contrary to that, Rich. What are your thoughts on that anomaly that we've seen?
Yeah, well, this is the second year, and we've seen some of that, but obviously it didn't impact Indiana. And I think you have to look at the individual matchups and see who those teams are, because sometimes those teams go in, even though they had a bye, they're still playing a formidable opponent. And sometimes in those, even though they got the bye, especially last year, they were the lower seeded team. Now we changed our seeding this year so that we took some of that out of the calculus. But I think that I don't want to make any prejudgments on whether the bye is good or bad. I just think that it depends on the teams that are matched up. And some cases the bye allows the team to heal. They have injuries. A player can play that might not have been able to play if they hadn't had the bye. But it just depends. And Indiana proved the theory wrong for sure. So I don't think we can make a general statement about that yet. I think we just need to continue to play, and a lot of the coaches want the bye. They want that time to heal and recover and to get better. So yeah, we just need to. I don't think the jury's out yet on that
one. The jury might not be out, Rich, but there is a lot of talk about the impact of a layoff, a substantial time layoff, and obviously the format for the 2026-2027 college football playoff is going to remain the same with the 12 teams as the previous season, but there's an extended time period with a later national championship game, some gaps in there. And I know you've talked about this previously. There is a lot of skepticism, a lot of criticism of the format for this year's playoff because of those gaps in between the games. What are your thoughts on some of the criticism of that scheduling?
Yeah. So next year has a more excessive gap than even this year had. And a lot of that is just the way the calendar lays out. And I know this is hard for people to understand, but you sort of have to be looking at the calendar. So we play our quarterfinals are on New Year's Day. And this year, New Year's Day falls on a Friday, right? And so, or this coming year, it falls on a Friday. And that creates a little bit of problem for our teams, because if we play on Friday with the NFL schedule in mind, what we could end up with is a team that plays on that Friday only having about 6 days before they have to play again after New Year's. And one of our charters is that a team will never have less than 7 days before their next game, between the quarterfinals to the semifinals. So rather than air 1 day early, we aired several days later with that gap, so that we didn't put a team in a predicament where they had to play with only 6 days in between their game, if that makes sense. And if you look at the calendar, with New Year's Day being on Friday, which would have been 3 games, it drives us to go a little bit further on the extension. And then every year, the way the calendar works, that extended time frame walks back, and it comes back to more of a normal time frame. So I know there's some criticism there, but for the health and safety of our players, we never want to put them in a position where the timeline between games is too tight. We would rather have a longer timeline than a timeline that's too tight, and we erred towards the longer. So yeah, it's really a calendar issue, not something we intentionally did. I mean, we have to sort of balance the NFL schedule with our schedule, and what games are played on that weekend. You know, a wild card weekend, playoff weekend for the NFL. We honor them, they honor us, and we also want to honor yeah, I saw that, Ollie. That eyebrow raised, but we do, and they're actually good partners for us. So, and we want to keep that partnership, but it's really player health and safety that we're concerned with as well.
Yeah, and it's like everything, it's a balancing act, isn't it, right? There's so many competing aspects of it, and, coaches will never want to play a kind of prolonged season, but as you say, you just have to work within the confines of what you've got. Ollie talked about another 12-team college football playoff, but you don't have to look far these days to see talk of a 24-team, a 48-team, a 64-team playoff, Rich. The Big Ten have come back this week with another revision of a 24-team playoff. And knowing that we were going to speak to you, I was just curious as to where these talks occur. Are these talks that occur just between the conferences? Do you guys will obviously get involved at some stage, but do you get involved at an early stage in these things? Is there a dialogue between all of the parties? I'm just curious as to how it plays out.
Sure. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of talk about the format and the number of teams that would be in the playoff. We get involved in that. We facilitate the discussion, and we provide, I would say, pros and cons of what the different numbers of playoffs would be. But ultimately, this decision lies with the conference commissioners. How many teams go into the playoff and what the format looks like. So the A4 in particular, the top 4 conferences, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC, talk about this extensively, but really all of the management committee, which is all of the FBS conferences and the University of Notre Dame athletic director, are involved in this to make input, to give some thoughts or, again, pros and cons to whatever they are. But in the end, with all of the commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. The A4 has their discussions, but in the end, the Big Ten and the SEC have to agree on whatever change happens. So if there is a change proposed by everyone else, those two have to agree, yes, this is what we're going to do. And if they have a difference of opinion, then we stay where we are. And that's the case we're in for next year. They had 16 was on the table, 24 was on the table. They didn't agree, so we're going to stay with 12 again. And to be very honest, I think both of them are happy with 12, so they didn't feel that they had to rush into a decision, that they could be deliberate, take another look at 12, see how that goes, and maybe that'll help inform a decision down the road. But it's something that people want to see. Some people want to see more playoff games. They want more access into the playoff. It's just a matter of how much access and where does the line get drawn. So we're still having those discussions and we're still going through the process, and we'll see if we're going to make a change or not. But frankly, I'm very happy to stay at 12 again and see how that goes, because it worked out great this year, and I think it'll work out great next year too.
I wanted to touch on, Rich, while we've got you, one of the teams that played in the 2024-2025 college football playoff is coming over to London this year. The Arizona State Sun Devils will play Kansas in the Union Jack Classic. You have played football yourself. What would that experience have meant to you to be able to come across the pond to a different country to play college football? And how good do you think it is for the game itself to see that level of global expansion that we're seeing with games in Ireland, games in the UK, a game in Brazil for the 2026 season as well?
I would have loved it as a player. Like that would have been one of those games that you never forget, right? You don't forget any game really, but there's some games that just stand out. A bowl game, a playoff game, a championship game. This would rate right there. Like this would be one of those things that you don't get to play in a game like that hardly ever in a career. And if you have that opportunity, oh man, that'd just be spectacular. So I know that those players are excited for that. And we played other games overseas, and they've been great successes, and I think very meaningful to the athletes. But also, it kind of spreads the word about what college football is all about to another audience. People that can experience it personally, in person, I think is really important. And the NFL has been doing a lot of that, playing overseas, and it's been great for them. I think it's good for college football too, to be able to have that opportunity to export this game and let other people experience it. But it seems to me that it's very much appreciated in the stadiums. The crowd seem to love it, and that just energizes everybody, the players, the coaches, everyone involved. So, but for me, if it was me as a player, in fact, if I'd done it, it would have been the first time I'd ever been to Europe. Like, what an experience. First time I went to Europe to play a football game. You just don't forget that. It leaves a mark on you for life. So I'm excited for those guys. Maybe I get to go. Maybe I can finagle that somehow. I'd love to be there. You guys could probably help me.
We'll see what strings we can pull for here. I'm not sure how influential we are really, but we will give it a go.
Well, yes. there's only one person on this call that's got key contacts in the aviation business. So I mean, get yourself on one of those B-1 bombers and a parachute, Rich. I think was
drop me out to Bombay into the stadium. That'd be great.
What pre-game show that is? I don't think we'll
never forget it.
Let's get that into discussion.
Yeah, introducing the executive director
on the 50-yard line.
Right, we said we were going to keep you 30 minutes, but I just want to ask you one more question before you go. Now, I think my timing is right here. This is your third year, or you're entering your third year as executive director. I just wanted to ask, what in that the 2.5 years so far, what has surprised you most about the role? And with it being college football, and we understand the chaos of college football better than most, do you keep getting surprised every year by the job and the game that we love?
Well, I would say that I'm new enough that the surprises keep coming, right? It is always something, and there's always something different. But the thing that people have to realize is there's not just one decision maker. We have 10 conferences and the Notre Dame athletic director that are making the decisions. And so it's it's a bit like a democracy. It's not as neat and clean as if there was just one person that was making a decision and saying, this is what we're going to do, like it or not. So there's a process that we have to go through. And I think for me personally, I think that's the right way to do it, right? Because you have 132 FBS teams that are going to play under whatever system is decided upon by this group. And having meaningful input from the whole group to make a decision is really important. And people are a bit up in arms because we didn't change the format or the decision came late or something like that. But the fact is, we have a good format and we're going to play it again next year, and they're going to get more of what we got this year. So I think fans should still be very excited, even though there might be a little what seems to be chaos. Actually, we're still working within a really good system, and it's going to produce a good product. But I will say, as a person that's responsible for whatever decisions come out, it is a little bit stressful at times trying to manage and navigate and understand. I thought the military was hard to make decisions in. So is college football. And the stakes are different, but, it's still a very similar decision process. And if you want to get to the right decision, you have to go through the fire to come out the other end with something that's going to work and that's going to be really good for everybody. So, I thought maybe I'd get in here and be able to go, this is it, so shall it be, let's move forward. No, not quite, not quite. But it's still good, and I still love it. I love being in this job, and just to do anything related to college football, as you guys know, is a real privilege. So I love it. I love it more than I thought I would.
Awesome. We've kept you longer than we said you would. Before we go, we usually ask our guests at this time what they've got lined up, what they're working on over the next few weeks. But there's no college football as stuff, and I would love to think that you get to put your feet up for the next few months, Rich. But I have the feeling from what you said that life of executive director never ends. So what do you do over the next few months until the season starts?
Well, let's see. Next week we have a meeting with the management committee, and we're going to talk about a lot of different issues, like some of the things we just talked about, the schedule, the future schedule, some of the debrief from the season, things that happened that went well, that maybe didn't go well, so that we can make them better. We'll talk a bit about format, about officiating, about a lot of the different things that go into making a season great. So we'll have that discussion next week, and we've been preparing for that. We've been doing a lot of debriefing. So we debriefed with ESPN last week to get the good and the bad. We're going to go, after our meeting with the management committee next week, we're going to go to Miami to debrief with the host committee there. Here's the good and bad, so we can understand everything that went on in that game. And then we start to bring our selection committee together, and we'll train them for a couple of months to get them ready, so that when the season starts, that they're ready to start watching games, to understand the process for selection, and that they'll be ready as well. So there's a lot of things that go on in the off season that get us ready for, at the beginning of the season, so that we're ready to go around the June timeframe. So we have from now until, I would say, June to get ourselves ready. Once June hits, media days start. We do all the media prep and do all of that. July's here, and then we're starting games in August. So it all comes real fast, but I love it. I will get some time to put my feet up and take a breather. But then that goes away, and it's time to get right back into it. So I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
But it's a great sport, and there's no end to better. I always say this, there is no end to better. We can always get better, and we're constantly trying to improve ourselves. So that's the name of the game.
What a great way to finish this episode. Thank you, Rich. You do appreciate your time. That's all the time we have for on this episode. So thanks to Rich and Ollie for being such awesome company. Thanks to you for listening and continuing to support us. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.